Now on ITV, with the votes counted and the results declared, who will form the next Welsh Government? For the very latest, it's Wales Decides with Andrea Byrne and Adrian Masters.
Mark Drakeford looks set to remain as First Minister and Labour to keep hold of power. Tonight we'll bring you all the latest as the counting continues.
I've got all the numbers as we await the final result and the next Welsh Parliament takes shape.
And I'm in the Senedd with all the reaction to the political fallout, and I'll be asking the question, what happens next?
What next indeed? Well, hello and good evening. Welcome back to Wales Decides. We are almost two-thirds of the way through the results in the Senedd elections 2021. Thanks for rejoining us. We're starting to get a slightly clearer picture now as we head later into the evening, and there have been some big headlines in the last couple of hours with seats changing hands in the Rhondda and in Brecon and Radnorshire as well, to name two. Professor Roger Arwen-Scully is here for some in-depth analysis this evening as we look at crunching those numbers in a bit more detail. And of course, Adrian Masters is where he's been most of the day at his big screen and the so-called Wheel of Fortune there. And it's filled up a bit now, hasn't it?
It has.
But still, as we look at it, only three colours there. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more with Roger in a moment. But bring us up to speed, because a lot has happened since you and I went off air at 5 o'clock.
It has. I think the story now is, the story has changed throughout the day, hasn't it? From when we began earlier on to around tea time and then now. The story now is Labour's victory in Wales. What size will the party be in the Senedd? Will it even have a majority? Which is quite an extraordinary thing to be talking about, considering what we were talking about at the beginning of when we went on air earlier on. So let's have a look at the big screen. I'm not going to call it the Wheel of Fortune anymore. I think it's the countdown screen now. So as we get closer to the middle point, we'll start playing the countdown music, if that's all right. So what we're looking at, just to remind you, is the results as they're coming in. Remember, we had two votes when we voted on Thursday. We voted for a constituency, the local area that we live in, and we voted we voted for an individual there belonging to a party. Then we also voted for a party for the region. So all those votes get added up and they get translated into the constituencies, which the map of Wales is divided up into, and you can see there are just two left of the constituencies, two of the 40s. Then, and what is happening now, is all the regional votes are being added up, and through a bit of mathematical jiggery-pokery that only people like Roger understands, it will be translated into Senedd members who are called regional list members. There's 4 for each region. We'll be putting them into these boxes here. This is the Senedd, and here you have clearly Labour, the biggest party already. Whatever else happens, that's there. This line here, there are 60 Senedd members. This is in the middle. That's 30. So 30 is, they'd rather 31, but 30 is a workable majority. They could form a government that way. It wouldn't be easy, but they could do it. And at the beginning of the day, we were talking about no party getting there, but Labour is no, I shouldn't do that, should I? Is getting very close to get that 30. The other story is... How much sugar have you had to keep you going this evening,
it's
all those double deckers. Important thing to say is, of the other two big parties, the Conservatives are looking at a good share of the vote, but it's not translating into seats, particularly not those Labour seats that they thought that they could take as they had at a Westminster level. Plaid Cymru is looking like having a very terrible result, and there are going to be some big questions asked for Plaid Cymru.
And Roger, as I mentioned earlier on, 3 colours there, and last Senedd election there were 5 parties in the Senedd. Is it likely, is it possible that it could stay as 3 colours?
It is possible. So yeah, we've seen the Liberal Democrats disappear from the constituency map there. We don't yet know how the regional list votes are going to play out, but we have seen some of the smaller parties doing pretty badly on the constituency votes, and if that pattern is repeated on the regional list votes, then we could see Abolish, Reform, UKIP and the Liberal Democrats and the Greens all falling short of the roughly about 6.5–7% you need in a region to get those regional list seats, in which case they would all again remain going to Plaid Cymru, the Conservatives and Labour.
And are we expecting to get some of those regional counts as we're on air tonight? Is that a possibility?
So we're thinking we'll get some of that tonight and then the rest coming in tomorrow. But you know, if we get the results in Mid and West Wales, that'll be really interesting, because that is where Labour have their best chances of getting regional list members, because they only have one constituency in that region. And at the moment, if we're thinking that Labour are going to win 27 constituencies. They should win at least 2 regional list members in Mid and West Wales. So it's looking like Labour on a minimum of 29 seats.
Well, that's not what we were saying at the start of the day, and indeed earlier on in the week either, so it's quite phenomenal, really. Let's pick up on that with Rob Osborne, who's in Cardiff for us this evening. And I think the only Cardiff count, the only count in the capital waiting to be declared now is the First Minister's seat of Cardiff West. Is there any sign of him there tonight? I'm sure he's going to have a smile on his face, isn't he, Rob?
Well, if Adrian is calling this countdown, think of me as Carol Vorderman, and the numbers I am awaiting is Cardiff West. It is the only of the 4 seats in the capital city which haven't declared, and it is the seat of the First Minister. And if memory recalls from 5 years ago when I was at this count, it was Cardiff West, the seat of the then Health Minister, I think he was, maybe in Public Services, Mark Drakeford, which was the last to declare. I can tell you, he's here. He's standing over there right now as they're still counting the votes. And he is quiet, he's reflective, he's not jumping for joy. But I have been speaking to senior Labour sources here who say, quote, this is a very good night for Labour. And I can tell you, here's a bit of exclusive. He's been watching ITV Wales today and he's been seeing the results come through. And I think he is very happy, winning places like the Rhondda, holding places like Senedd and the other key battlegrounds that they thought they were going to lose. The plan for what we expect is that hopefully within the hour, we will get a result from Cardiff West, and then the First Minister will stand on the podium, likely be declared the victor, and then hopefully we'll be having a chat with him. What we have heard is that Cardiff Central and Cardiff North have been held by the Labour Party, and Cardiff South and Penarth, the seat of Vaughan Gething, the Health Minister. That was around half an hour ago that was declared. He was smiling like I've never seen him smile before, given the year of handling COVID he's had. He's very happy. And I think that sums up the mood for Labour. Look, Mark Drakeford was called the quiet man of Welsh politics. When he stood for the Labour leader, people were saying, is he a bit boring? Is that going to turn the voters off? Well, you heard Adrian now. We're talking a possible majority territory. Possibly Mark Drakeford has been vindicated.
It did sound like Mark Drakeford, when we spoke to him earlier on, he was still sounding quite cautious and talking about whether people had turned out to vote. Well, he probably should have something of a smile on his face now, surely.
I literally bumped into him earlier as I was watching Vaughan Gething's count. I turned round and, oh, hello, First Minister. Hello. I've been watching you all day, he said. And no, he's playing it. He's playing it cool. He wants to see the numbers. He knows a few seats here and then could make a difference as to whether he goes it alone or he may need to seek help. It's not looking like that based on what Adrian and Roger are saying. But the people around him, they are smiling.
Rob Osborne, will return to you as and when we might hear that declaration later on in the evening. Not such a good night as it's developing for Plaid Cymru. The leader there, Adam Price, still waiting to hear if he's to keep his seat. He says that he remains positive despite the disappointing results in the Rhondda, where Plaid's Leanne Wood lost her seat to Labour's Elizabeth Buffy Williams. That is hugely significant, of course, because back in 2016, she made headlines for all the right reasons, the only seat to change hands. So this time, as you can see her there, pictures of just when she made her speech on the stage there, and she's leaving the count. Those were pictures from a little earlier on, with a disappointment there of losing the seat to Labour and to Buffy Williams. Let's hear a reaction to that from the leader, Adam Price, now.
I'm still enthused by what was an incredibly positive campaign for us. We've got new voters coming over for the first time, young voters in particular, in unprecedented numbers supporting Plaid Cymru because of our positive message of hope and change, and of course our vision of an independent Wales that is going to deliver for us ultimately a country which can realise its potential. So in terms of the big picture, the long view, then I think this has been an incredible step forward for those of us in the independence movement, and certainly we feel incredibly energised by the warmth and enthusiasm that we had in this campaign for Plaid Cymru's message.
Because Rhondda and Llanelli were simply must-wins for you as a party and didn't quite manage that this time round. That must be a disappointment.
Oh, I'm always, disappointed, and certainly to lose, dear friends and colleagues from the Senedd, and obviously that is a setback and upsetting. I'm impatient for change. That's why I'm in politics, because I want this nation to move forward, to realise its potential, and of course I want it to happen now. But I'm still encouraged by the positive response that Plaid has had, and I genuinely feel we have sowed the seeds of change in this election, and many of those conversations that we've had may not have resulted in votes for us this time, but we have built a bridge in people's minds that now are open to the idea of Wales becoming an independent nation. And when they look at the politics that is happening in the country next door, in England, a country that is moving further and further to the right, and we see the contrast between our politics and our values here in Wales, then I'm convinced more and more people in the future will come over to the independence movement, will vote for Plaid Cymru, and we will see that political progress that we want to see. In the meantime, we will use the platform that we have. We will use every voice and every vote and every seat that we have to do the most important thing of all, which is to improve the lives of the people of Wales.
Leader of Plaid Cymru, Adam Price there, reacting to the loss of the seats in the Rhondda, but also talking about, well, he seemed to remain quite buoyant, really. He's talking about sowing the seeds of change for the future, building bridges, looking ahead, I think he is really, to the next 5 years and the next election already, and trying to put a good spin on it for his party. Let's head north now and speak to Carol Green, who's in Deeside for us this evening. And one of the big stories there, of course, is that the Vale of Clwyd changed hands. A win for Gareth Davies there with the Conservatives from Labour, but the Conservatives not having really made the inroads that they might have hoped for in that region, Carol.
No, not at all. What a difference 12 hours makes, Andrea. When we came here this morning, as journalists, we were receiving the briefings from Labour, very cautious, talking about mountains to climb and headwinds. And, having heard those results from Hartlepool, thinking particularly this region in North East Wales, where they'd seen their red wall swept aside by the Conservatives in 2019, I think Labour were bracing themselves for something similar, but it just hasn't happened. What's happened on this side of the border in Wales is very different to what's happened to Labour in England. We've seen Labour hang on in Wrexham and Clwyd South, and here in Delyn, all seats which they were targeted by the Conservatives. Of course, the Conservatives have got over the line in the Vale of Clwyd, but for most people watching the politics of this region over the last year or so, that didn't come as much of a surprise, and Labour only lost in the Vale of Clwyd by 1%. Now, this was meant to be, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, has been here in a big, energetic, charismatic campaign, what he's famous for, what has drew voters to him in 2019 in this region. But it just hasn't happened for the Conservatives here. And what happens in these seats, of course, is really important to the overall picture of seats for Labour. Now, they may even pick up a seat on the list because they've lost that constituency, Vale of Clwyd. So they may end up evens here in North East Wales, and that just simply wasn't on the cards. Most people would not have put them in that position over the last few weeks, and certainly not today, first thing this morning. We wait now for the regional outcome, and we're expecting that about 10:15 tonight, so hopefully when we're still on air.
Hopefully we will be returning to you, as you say, before we go off air this evening. And just to re-emphasise what you were just saying there, Carol, that Gareth Davis in the Vale of Clwyd, that was just a very narrow majority of just over 300, I think it was. So no doubt we will be talking about the Vale of Clwyd in some great detail again at the next Senedd election. We'll be speaking to Adrian after the break to get some more analysis of those seats in the north and just how important they are and why that story matters so much to the bigger picture. But let's now go to a quick break. Hello and welcome back to Wales Decides, the later night version. And now we have almost all of the constituency seats declared in the Senedd elections for 2021. We're just waiting now on Cardiff West, and we're waiting on the Vale of Glamorgan, and we still, of course, are waiting on all the regional seats to declare. So that's why we're just heading towards 40, and then there's another 20 to declare on top of that. Let's get some party reaction now and head over to the Senedd, where Ellie Pitt is for us this evening, where she's been for us all day. You're still there, but you've had a change of cast as regards to the party members you'll be talking to this evening. What are they saying tonight?
Yes, Andrea, I'm here in the Senedd, where over the next few days, new and returning members will be coming to claim their seats for the next 5 years, either in person or virtually. And as you say, yes, I've had a change of cast. So this evening, I'm joined by Labour's Carwyn Jones, Conservative MP David Davis, and the Plaid Cymru MP Ben Lake. Thanks all very much for joining me. Well, first of all, Carwyn, I mean, celebrations beginning to take place in the Labour camp, a possible majority being touted.
Well, we don't know yet, but we can be happy with the result. Disappointed, obviously, to lose the Vale of Clwyd, but given what happened in 2019, when a lot of that red wall crumbled, it's very, very encouraging to see us win seats by comfortable majorities. And that reflects the hard work that's been put in. You know, we've been in power here in this building for 22 years, and to have a result like this is quite extraordinary. It's a tribute to the way Mark has dealt with the pandemic.
A tribute to the way he's handled it, but it has been sort of fair wind blowing the sails of the Labour campaign, hasn't it? Because there hasn't been much reflection on that 22 years in power, has there? It has been more about the last year.
Well, people like honest, competent government, and I think that's what they've seen over the course of the past year. Now, let's not pretend that somehow the pandemic is useful in terms of politics. You never know how a pandemic is going to play out. There's a lot of pressure on leaders, wherever they are in the UK, to make sure that people are protected. The last year would have been very difficult for Mark and his team, and you have to show that you are competent so people trust you, and that's a good base on which to build, as we've seen in terms of this election.
Well, he's had a good base on which to build, but let's turn to the Conservative camp now and MP David Davis. And the Conservatives haven't had the result that they would have perhaps hoped for here in Wales. What are you putting that down to?
Well, no, you're right. It's been a bit disappointing, frankly. Obviously, I presume we'll do rather better on the regional seats now, particularly because we haven't done as well as we wanted to on the first pass of postings. But I don't, I can't deny it hasn't been the great night that I would have liked. But basically, again, I think we've been dealing with this pandemic. It's made it actually quite difficult for us to get our message over. And Mark Drakeford, I can't take it away from him, has done a very good job in portraying, that he's done things differently. The reality is, of course, and I've sat as a minister in on the meetings, the COBRA meetings, the ministerial meetings, and of course, either Mark Drakeford or Vaughan Gethin are always there. The Labour government in Wales, like the Scottish government, went into lockdown at the same time as the rest of the UK, came out, went back in again and came out, and haven't really done anything that much different. But Mark has had that opportunity to portray himself as the man who dealt with the pandemic. I can't take it away from him. People have bought into that.
But Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, has had the opportunity as well to get his message across in Wales, hasn't he? Has he not got
in quite
that
the same?
in
Well,
Wales?
not in quite the same way, because possibly on ITV, but the BBC have been using Mark Drakeford rather more than Boris. But I'm sure you do things differently. Look, I'm not taking it away from Labour's victory. Labour have had a good day today. we've got and we as Democrats, of course, we respect that and we look forward to working with them. We have got a new and very talented group of people coming in, like my own compatriot Peter Fox, of course, in Monmouth. And I think we'll see Labour being held to account perhaps in a way that hasn't happened before. And I look forward to that. But look, we're Democrats here. And you know, it does look very likely that Labour will either be very close to or will form a majority. And I think as Democrats, you can't run around saying, I don't like it, I'm getting mad as hell. You have to accept it. That's what people have said, and we respect that. And we should, and it's right that we should do so. But of course, afterwards, we'll learn some lessons and have to kind of continue to have that conversation with the people of Wales.
Very gracious of you indeed. Let's bring in Ben Lake now for Plaid Cymru. And I mean, I'm afraid to say another disappointing sort of result for you too. Where does Plaid go from here?
Well, I think it is disappointing in the sense that we won't be forming a majority government in Wales. At the end of the day, that's what we all stand in an election to win. So clearly it's going to be disappointing in that sense. And particular disappointment, of course, in the Rhondda, where we've lost Leanne Wood. And I don't mind saying it, I think, and perhaps the panellists will also agree, she would be a big loss to the Senedd, to Welsh politics, but clearly an even bigger loss for the party. So yes, it's very, very bitter pill to swallow. But there are then also signs, quite positive developments in certain parts of Wales, where perhaps we haven't had that presence in the past, where we haven't had an opportunity to start building campaign teams. And despite the fact there's been a challenging election in terms of campaigning, we've seen a few stellar performances, in my opinion, and perhaps the beginnings of a better campaign in 2026.
Well, we've got lots more to talk about, and I hope we get a chance to do that, definitely. Lots more to get into over the next half an hour or so, or 40 minutes on the programme. But for now, it's back to you, Andrea.
Elliot in the Senedd with that party reaction. Thank you very much. And let's pick up with some of those points with Adrian. You were going to talk about the seats in the north, and it sort of fits in quite nicely with what Ellie's been talking about with her guests as well. David Davis there saying not the great night that they would have hoped for. And indeed, that does fit in with the picture up north, doesn't it? It's strange, isn't it? Because the Conservatives have done quite well, really. I'm just looking at, in terms of constituency seats, in 2016 they had 6, now they've got 8, and there's a strong chance that they will pick, as David Davis was saying, pick up some list seats. Also, you know, I've seen some fairly ramshackle Conservative election campaigns. This wasn't one. There was both sides of the party at a UK level and a Welsh level were working well together. There was discipline, there were some impressive candidates. So why is this? Why is David Davis talking about this as a disappointing night? I think we can illustrate that by looking at what happened in the Vale of Clwyd, which is, you know, undoubtedly good news for the Conservatives. And if we look at the result, it's because of that closeness of the result. Okay, so the Conservatives and Labour almost neck and neck, only 300 votes in it. So why are the Conservatives disappointed? It's because they did not manage, because Labour they missed out in this seat, but across the north managed to have that kind of response and hold off the Conservative challenge, which they managed to they didn't manage to do in 2019 at a Westminster level. So that's why. We've talked, haven't we, about the regional seats yet to declare, Roger, and one of those involves the Tory leader, Andrew R.T. Davis. Talk us through what could happen there.
Well, Andrew R.T. Davis standing in South Wales Central, I think, you know, given the Conservatives haven't won any of the constituency seats, we think, in that region, it must be overwhelmingly likely that he will win a regional list seat, and the Conservatives will almost certainly get a second list seat in that region. In North Wales, it's more questionable. I mean, the Conservatives now have, you know, these 3 constituencies up there. If they'd swept the board like they did in the general election, then, you know, they would have been delighted by those constituency seats and quite happy to maybe then sacrifice a list seat. Now I think, you know, the calculations for someone like North Wales are going to be actually very tight. But I think we must expect, if the Conservatives perform as strongly on the list as they have overall on the constituencies, you know, they will be picking up a few of the seats, for instance, that UKIP won 5 years ago.
And David Davis sounding quite positive about the list seats because maybe they haven't done as well in the constituency seats, which is how this electoral process works in terms of the regional seats and the jiggery-pokery which Adrian was talking about earlier.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Conservatives' vote share has gone up significantly from 5 years ago. What they've run into, though, in those clutch of seats in North Wales, elsewhere, is an impressively resilient Labour campaign, and Labour have been able to hold their ground very effectively. But I think, the Conservatives are also performing strongly, and I think we'll expect to see that reflected in them picking up some list seats, and very likely the Conservatives ending this election with more seats in the Senedd than they've ever had before.
Is it worth just reminding ourselves about Brecon and Radnorshire, which was, is unalloyed good news, I think, for the Conservatives, and I think we can see the result there. That was a significant and decisive result. But I mean, I think for the Lib Dems, pretty bad news, both as a constituency and as part of a region. Is that right, Roger?
Yes, I mean, that was the Liberal Democrats' last seat in the Senedd. They've lost that constituency quite decisively. In other seats that historically in Mid and West Wales were Liberal Democrat bastions like Ceredigion, they finished 4th. Montgomery, they finished 3rd. All of that suggests that the Liberal Democrats are going to find it very difficult to get enough votes to get a list seat in Mid and West Wales.
And after we've spoken about that, might mean that they disappear from the Senedd picture altogether. Roger, Adrian, for now, thank you. Let's go to a break now.
The Brit Awards 2021, live Tuesday at 8 on ITV and stream live on ITV Hub.
Well, hello and welcome back to our analysis of the results as they come in. And on this Senedd Election 2021, you can see the results as we have them so far in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Now, just before the break, I was speculating with Adrian and Roger about whether the Liberal Democrats could be wiped out of the Senedd altogether. Could that be a possibility? And one of the reasons we were talking about that is because of the results in Brecon and Radnorshire, which was held by the Liberal Democrats and by Kirsty Williams, the Education Minister, but she was standing down. Standing in her place was William Powell. Unfortunately, he lost his seat, so he'll be disappointed this evening. Let's hear from him now.
Obviously, somewhat disappointed by the result that's come through this evening, but I'm pleased that our vote in the areas that are represented by Welsh Liberal Democrats at local authority level stayed up very well. However, it's clear that the legacy of 21 years of Kirsty's excellent service, much of the personal vote that she was able to attract in some of the earlier elections has departed with her. Also, I think it's fair to say that there's a significant level of increase in the Labour vote, which is probably recognition of the success of the COVID strategy that she and the wider Welsh Government have been part of.
Well, let's get some reaction to that and the situation with the Liberal Democrats. We can go to speak to Jess Main in Ceredigion. They didn't perform well there in the constituency, but they will be looking, Jess, to pick up a seat on the regional lists.
Yes, Andrea, we've said all along today that Brecon and Radnorshire would be one of the seats to watch in this election, and that certainly has been the case. This is a significant loss for the Lib Dems, and with quite a large majority. There was almost 4,000 votes between the Tories and them. Now, the question all along throughout this campaign has been whether the Lib Dems could be successful without Kirsty Williams, and now we know, of course, the answer to that. We heard from Bill Powell there. Now, as you say, the Lib Dems will now be hoping to scrape a seat on the regional list, but as time goes on, that's looking less and less likely, and if they can't, then they could be wiped out of Welsh politics entirely. Now, the story here turns to that regional list, and one of the parties hoping to pick up a seat there is Abolish. Though if we look at the results so far, they haven't been performing as well as polls first suggested. And to talk to me a little bit more about that is Claire Mills from the party. That's the case from your perspective, Claire?
Yes, Jess, it's been a disappointment so far this evening, but we always knew that the constituencies were going to be a harder seat to take hold of. And, you know, we were estimated at polling to 2%. We've actually gone above that on a number of the constituency seats. But the regional seats are all up for grabs and the night is still young, so there's still all to play for.
And why do you think, you know, those votes haven't been coming in for Abolish?
I think we're a relatively new party. We've only really been in full force for the previous 12 months. We've built our membership up, our supporters, our social media following, and that momentum is growing and growing and growing. But you still have the other so-called anti-devolution parties, if you like Reform and UKIP, that are saying that they want to scrap or get rid of the Assembly. But really, at the end of the day, Abolish is the only party that has that one policy that simply wants to end devolution and bring the powers back to one United Kingdom, one UK government, one NHS, one education system. So if we aren't successful this time, we will carry on fighting for the next 5 years, and we will just build up and build up. And of course, we've got the council elections next year, which we will definitely be fielding candidates for.
Claire, thanks so much for chatting to us. Well, we're expecting a result sometime around midnight.
OK, Jess in Ceredigion, speaking to Abolish the Welsh Assembly for us this evening. Thank you very much. I'm just hearing that we are due to get a declaration, a result from Cardiff West, the First Minister's seat. They are gathered on the stage. Let's listen in and see where we are with that forthcoming announcement.
Lee David Patrick Canning, Abolish the Welsh Assembly Party, 682 votes.
Lee David Patrick Canning, Abolish the Welsh Assembly Party, 682.
Mark Drakeford, Welsh Labour, 17,665 votes.
Mark Drakeford, Llafur Cymru, 2015, 665.
Sean Driscoll, Welsh Conservative Party candidate, 6,454 votes.
Sean Driscoll, ymgeisydd Plaid Cymru, 6,454.
David Peter Griffin, Green Party, 1,287 votes.
David Peter Griffin, Plaid Werdd, 1,287.
Heath John Marshall, Welsh Liberal Democrats, Put Recovery First, 803 votes.
Heath John Marshall, Democratiaid Rhyddfrydol Cymru, adfywio yn Flaenoriaeth, 803.
Neil John McAvoy, Propel Wales Needs Champions, 3,473 votes.
Neil John McAvoy, Propel Mae Cymru angen pencampwyr, 3,473.
Nick Mullins, Reform UK, 175 votes.
Nick Mullins, Reform UK, 175.
Therefore, I give public notice that Mark Drakeford is duly elected as the member of the Senedd for the Cardiff West constituency.
Felly rwyf yn datgan bod Mark Drakeford wedi'i iawnethol fel aelod o'r Senedd ar gyfer etholaeth Gorllewin Caerdydd.
And the total number of votes cast across Cardiff West at the Senedd election, held on the 6th of May 2021, was 36,711 votes.
Cyfanswm nifer y pleidleisiau a fwriwyd ar draws Gorllewin Caerdydd yn etholiad y Senedd ac yn halwyd ar y 6 o Fai 2021 oedd 36,711.
The total number of ballot papers rejected was 180.
Cyfanswm nifer y papurau pleidleisio wrthodwyd oedd 180.
And I'll now ask the successful candidate to say a few words.
Let's hear from the First Minister, Mark Drakeford, now, holding his seat for Cardiff West.
Wel, diolch yn fawr iawn. Dwi'n mynd I fod yn byr achos mae'n hwyr yn y nos. Thank you all very much indeed. I'm going to be very brief given the time in the evening. Thank you to the presiding officer and particularly to all the staff who have worked so hard and stayed so late in the extraordinary circumstances of this election. Can I thank my opponents from the mainstream parties during this election for the democratically respectful way in which this campaign has been conducted. I really appreciate that very much, so diolch yn fawr iawn I chi gyd. I must of course thank all my supporters who have worked throughout this campaign without having a candidate here to work with them for so many evenings and parts of the last month. You have been absolutely fantastic. My agent, Selwyn Hughes, once again, but everybody who's played their part. Diolch o galon I chi gyd. And of course, mostly and mainly to the residents and citizens.
Well, we're just going to leave Mark Drakeford's victory speech there. He was bouncing up to the podium as we heard those figures announced. 17,000 votes, over 17,000 votes for Mark Drakeford, a majority of over 11,000. I think that explains the bouncing up to the podium. If you need to grab a cup of tea, now is the time because we're just going to go to a quick break. Well, I hope you've got back to the sofa with your cuppa. Now, just before the break, we were at the Cardiff West declaration where the First Minister secured his seat. But listen to this, the majority is quite staggering and the increase in the majority is quite staggering. So in 2016, it was a majority of just over 1,000 and now it's just over 10,000. Let's return to Cardiff West now and speak to Rob Osborne, who I think is with the First Minister. Rob.
Yes, 10 minutes before we come off air and we can speak to the man of the moment, First Minister Mark Drakeford. Congratulations on your victory here. People have been asking me all night, is he smiling? You're smiling now?
Well, I'm smiling now because we have the result in Cardiff West. Very grateful indeed to people in my constituency for re-electing me for another 5 years and putting their trust in Welsh Labour.
Why has Welsh Labour succeeded where Labour over the border has not?
Much too early, Rob, for me to have an answer to that question. I've spent my whole day, as I have the last month, concentrating on Wales and Labour's performance here in Wales, and we've exceeded the expectations that we came into this election with, and still some results to go.
What were your, we can speak honestly now, what were your expectations for tonight? What did you think you were going to end up with?
Well, I always thought that we would do better than that original poll that put us on 22 seats. Did I think that we would be up, approaching the top of the 20s? That was probably at the top end of what I thought was achievable, given the extraordinary circumstances of this election.
Do you think you got enough for a majority? What's your intelligence telling you?
Well, no party's ever won a majority in the Senedd, and it's very hard indeed to find those extra couple of seats. But we'll be far closer to it than I think anybody imagined we would be.
So you will go it alone?
No, I've no idea. We will think very carefully. We will look at all the results, all the regional results. A third of the Senedd is still to be elected, and it's been a very long day here in the Cardiff West count, and in looking at constituencies across Wales. I will want to sit down tomorrow when we have the full suite of results in front of us to think about how we can achieve what we need here in Wales, which is stable and progressive government.
Very quickly, last question. Do you feel vindicated? Because when you stood for Labour leader, some had question marks over whether you were the right candidate. How do you feel on a personal level tonight?
Well, of course, it is fantastic on a personal level to see the sort of results we've had right across Wales. And everywhere I've been in this campaign, we've had such a warm reception from people. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And tonight, it is a bit of a culmination of all of that.
First Minister, thank you. And there we are. Mark Drakeford, more than likely returning as First Minister.
Rob Osborne and Mark Drakeford, thank you very much indeed. Well, a talk there with the First Minister about that race to 30 and whether or not he thinks they can even secure a majority, which seems quite extraordinary to be talking about. Well, one of the seats which is yet to declare, the only one which is yet to declare in terms of the constituencies, is the Vale of Glamorgan, which is a Tory target seat. The Welsh Conservatives would very much like to get hold of this seat, but at the moment it's Jane Hutt for Labour, to see whether she can hold on to it, and that would certainly help with the race to 30 and possibly speculating about that majority. Let's go to Charon Preet for the latest. She's in Barry for us this evening. Charon Preet.
Well, Andrea, to take the words out of Mark Drakeford's mouth there, it has been a long day here in the Vale of Glamorgan and we're still waiting. We are the last constituency in Wales to get that all-important result. And as the time ticks on, the tension's building too. Now, we've heard from Labour sources on the floor that they're quietly confident about Jane Hutt's chances of winning this, and that will, as you say, really help Mark Drakeford's chances in this race to 30. But it's certainly not a done deal. Conservatives are also optimistic, perhaps both sides both putting their bravest face forward. We really don't know at the minute. I've had my fingers and toes crossed that we'd get a declaration for you before 10 o'clock, but that's looking unlikely. Now, Jane Hutt clinched the seat here last election with a razor-thin majority of 777 votes. The question is, can she do it again? And when that's all over, we'll be back tomorrow to find out about the regional list. As we've heard already, we've got 2 Tory seats there at the moment. It's looking likely that that will remain the case. And then there's the Plaid seat and the UKIP seat up for grabs. All of these could affect the big picture of what we're looking at for our next Senedd.
Charon Preet in Barry. It certainly has been a long day. You never know. We still have got about 7 minutes left. Who knows what could happen in the next 7 minutes? We might be returning to you. In the meantime, grab your chocolate bars and your caffeine, because you might need it, as you say. Still possibly a while to go yet in the Vale of Glamorgan. Now, we heard Mark Drakeford talking about his victory in Cardiff West just before. He was also asked the question by Rob Osborne there, would they be going it alone then? He wouldn't be drawn on that. Let's get some reaction to everything we've heard over the last few minutes by crossing to the Senedd now and speaking to Ellie Pitt, who's joined by her guests this evening.
Thanks, Andrea. Yes, well, I think it's time to start asking the question, what happens next, really? So I'm joined tonight by Labour's Carwyn Jones, by the Conservatives' David Davis, and by Plaid Cymru's Ben Lake. Ben, let's start with you, and we've got to ask the question, does Adam Price stay as leader?
Without doubt. I don't think there's a question of it. You know, yes, there will be some disappointment tonight in the party ranks, but we'll wait to see the regional results, which may well give a different tint to things. And in the morning, we'll dust ourselves down, look at where things went well, and they certainly did go well in certain areas of Wales, learn those lessons, as well as the lessons from those areas that perhaps didn't go as well and according to plan, and just focus now on building on those new candidates that we have in parts of Wales where historically perhaps we aren't seen as challengers, and then start for the campaign for 2026 tomorrow.
And very briefly, sticking with the same message of independence, perhaps?
I think so. I think one of the big questions facing UK politics, as well as Welsh politics in the next couple of years, will be constitutional ones, I'm afraid to say. And on that matter, I think it's always good to have a clear line. And I think the party has decided to go that way, and I think we should stick with it.
Fair enough. With the Conservative camp, Andrew Davis, can he remain as leader? Can he survive this?
Oh, I think he can, but obviously it's a matter for the team to decide who they want as leader. It's none of my business. But I imagine what the Conservative Party will be saying is we have to accept the result. Clearly, Labour are going to be running Wales for the next few years, whether in a majority or in some sort of with a bit of extra help.
Do you want to keep him as the leader, though? We're here again in 5 years' time. Do you want to go into the next election?
I think Andrew's done an excellent job. What I want to see us do now is to show responsible opposition, to be challenging Labour over issues like the health service, which isn't as effective as it is in England, education, where even Labour have admitted they've had problems, and over issues like the M4 relief load, to continue to do that in a responsible fashion, but also to offer support to the Labour government over the big issues like the pandemic, where support is needed, to show responsible opposition. That's what we will inevitably be doing
to gain
after
any
this.
traction in Wales, do you think the Conservatives need to give a more direct message to the Welsh people rather than just say, well, look at England for our track record?
Yes, I think we have to offer a very clear message to the people of Wales, and clearly it certainly hasn't been clear enough at the moment. But I'm not putting any blame on anyone for that. I mean, it's been a very difficult year. For now, I would accept that based on these results, inevitably Mark Drakeford is going to be the First Minister, and our job as responsible opposition is to accept that result and to offer scrutiny, fair scrutiny of Labour's policies over the coming years.
Mark Drakeford remains First Minister, perhaps then, as you sort of imply there. But Carwyn Jones, he's saying that, they might be able to go it alone, but he might need to lean on others. It's not easy going it alone, is it? From your experience, tell me what's going through your mind.
Well, it's too early yet to tell what the final arithmetic will look like. And that's an important factor. But what you do have in this place is there's a tradition here of working with other parties in a way that isn't quite there in Westminster, because no one's ever had a majority, and that means you talk to other parties. If you're taking legislation through, you find out what the common ground is. There are discussions over the budget. So actually you can govern here with a minority, if that's what you feel is possible, because of that tradition of cross-party working.
Exceptionally quickly, who do you think he might be looking to lean on in times of need?
We'll have to wait and see what the arithmetic looks like. I don't know. I mean, if you're asking me to predict what the regional list result will be, I mean, I'll leave that to people who are far more qualified than me.
A coalition, Carwyn.
Sorry?
A unionist coalition.
A grand coalition. We'll all be in power, no in opposition. There we are.
Well, there you are. You heard it here first. That's one of the strategies, perhaps, going forward. My guests tonight, thank you all very much for joining me. Really appreciate it. Andrea, for now, it's back to you.
Yes, we really appreciate it too. Thanks very much, Hayley. Well, there's a phrase we can pick up on, a grand coalition. There we go. We might be talking about that for the next few days. Roger, we're nearly coming to the end of the programme this evening. What a day it has been. One of the things that it seems quite staggering is some of the huge majorities that we've seen. What's happening with the share of the vote? Where are all these votes coming from?
Well, a lot of it is coming from people who voted for UKIP 5 years ago. UKIP's vote has collapsed, more or less, and we're seeing that rebounding to the benefit in many places of the Conservatives and also the Labour Party.
So, and also, we don't yet know, do we, what's happening with those votes in the regional seats? That's all to play for still.
No, we don't. And whether any of these smaller parties will get enough votes to get representation, or whether the three parties we see on the map here will actually be the ones dominating the regional list seats as well.
Well, we didn't think we'd quite be here, did we?
Really did
for so many reasons, but also because things were very slow to get off to a start this afternoon, weren't they? But now we have just one seat left to declare in the Vale of Glamorgan. Where are we at, Adrian?
Doesn't it look nice now that there's all this colour in there? Yes, we've just got the one result to wait for. You were right. We didn't expect this result. We expected Labour to be the biggest party, but we didn't expect to be talking about a clear Labour victory and a possible Labour majority. That's something quite extraordinary. What I'm still trying to get to grips with is quite why the Conservatives, who've had a good campaign and objectively had a good result, have also had a disappointing time. Why that hasn't translated across why what has been happening in England hasn't translated across to Wales, because there was every sign that was going to happen. So I'm sure the Conservatives will be asking the same question as David Davis said. So yeah, we're in interesting times, I think, because I mean, the reason I keep doing this job is because politics changes all the time. It's like a kaleidoscope, and it gets shaken again, and we've just been through the most turbulent and unsettled